This is You've Already Been Hacked, recorded on 3 October 2020. As we start off the fall harvest season, looks like 2020 and cyber hacks have no way of slowing down. The U.S. Treasury has issued guidance saying there are sanction risks for paying ransomware operators. So, on the 1st of October, Treasury Department officials made that guidance official in an advisory published this past week. It warns that payments made to specific entities or to any entity in certain countries, specifically those designated sanctions nexus, could subject the payer to financial penalties levied by the Office of Foreign Asset Control, or the OFAC. The prohibition applies not only to the group that infected, but to any companies or contractors the hacked group's security or insurance engages with, including those who provide insurance, digital forensics, and incident response, as well as all financial services that helped facilitate or process ransom payments. Under U.S. law, U.S. persons are generally prohibited from engaging directly or indirectly with transactions with people or organizations on the OFAC's designated nationals and blocked persons list, other prohibited lists, or in Cuba, Iran, North Korea, and other countries or regions. In recent years, the Treasury Department has added several known cyber threat groups to its designation list, which include Evgeny Mikhailovich-Brokhov, the developer of the CryptoLocker, an early ransomware variant that infected 234,000 computers, half of them in the United States, 2 Iranian nationals behind SamSam, individuals and groups connected with the Lazarus Group, which is responsible for WannaCry, Evil Corp, a Russian-based criminal organization whose leader was indicted last year, among others. Under OFAC's enforcement guidelines, OFAC will also consider a company's self-initiated, timely, and complete report of ransomware attacks to law enforcement to be a significant mitigating factor in determining an appropriate enforcement outcome if the situation is later determined to have a sanctions nexus. OFAC will also consider a company's full and timely cooperation with law enforcement, both during and after a ransomware attack, to be a significant mitigation factor when evaluating a possible enforcement outcome. At the end, the advisory went on to say that people won't be penalized in all cases for paying ransoms. In some cases, victims can receive a dispensation in advance for paying a ransom, and in others, infractions may be excused or mitigated. This past week, one of the largest healthcare systems hacks occurred in the United States. Universal Health Systems suffered a ransomware attack this past weekend. The attack prompted the organization to shut down systems at its healthcare facilities in the United States. Reports from employees indicate that facilities in several states, including California, Texas, and Florida, were without access to phone systems or computers. All the affected facilities are redirecting ambulances to other hospitals, and patients who require surgery are being transferred. A public statement from UHS says that its IT network across UHS facilities is currently offline due to an IT security issue. Now, this was back on the 1st of October. The ransomware has the hallmarks of Raikou, which first appeared in 2018 and is widely linked to Russian cybercriminals. Raikou is typically used in so-called big game hunting attacks in which hackers attempt to extort large ransom from corporate victims. The ransomware was attributed to North Korean actors when it first emerged, but many researchers now link it to Russia. It often is preceded by a phishing attack that infects a target with a Trojan. It then exfiltrates the victim's data and triggers the Raikou infection. The ransomware seems to be used by a few splinter groups in addition to its originators, though making it difficult to trace and correlate activity from presence of the malware alone. The actor that first used it throughout 2018 and 2019 has seemed to go dark this past April, but looks like they have just recently reappeared. For note, UHS has some 400 healthcare facilities and centers and hospitals across the United States and in the United Kingdom. Microsoft Office 365 had an outage this past Monday. Affected users in the United States and Australia reported the outage started about 9:30 p.m. Universal Time. Microsoft first attempted to fix the problem by rolling back a change identified as causing the outage, but the rollback did not resolve the problem. Microsoft then began rerouting traffic to alternate systems to provide further relief to the affected users. The issue was resolved this past week. Now, this one hit a little closer to home for the professor here, as Monday night I use Microsoft Teams as part of my class that I teach on cybersecurity risk management. I noticed this about 5 p.m. my time, and we had to roll with it for the rest of the class. Thankfully, being a cybersecurity expert and generally a geek, I was able to roll to my own alternative systems to ensure my students were able to have the lesson that was planned. However, there were far more worse things that happened because of this outage. Maybe. 911 emergency operations in the United States had a system outage. At least 14 states reported outages in their 911 emergency service lines on Monday. The outages were reported in Arizona, California, Colorado, Delaware, Florida, Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, Minnesota, Nevada, North Carolina, North Dakota, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Washington State. The outage impacted all emergency services simultaneously. Now, those services were restored within 60 minutes for most affected counties. A clue of the source of the outage comes from the city of Redmond, Washington, headquarters for Microsoft, which reported a similar phone line outage and blamed the incident on a larger Microsoft Office 365 outage. Other sources suggest the 911 outage may have not necessarily been related to that particular Microsoft event, and most likely originated at a provider of PSPs, or public safety answering points. Now, PSPs are the telephony systems where 911 or 112 emergency calls are terminated before reaching the actual emergency service call center. Essentially, they are choke points in the 911 system, which explains why multiple emergency services across different states had issues. According to other reports, a PSP provider named Intrado was most likely behind the 911 outage. Now, it's just a little convenient that Microsoft went down and the 911 system went down, and Intrado had a problem as well. Maybe they were using Microsoft Office 365 and that's what happened. Also interesting, this happened the day after the UHS hack that we just spoke about. Elsewhere in our healthcare system in the United States, Lawrence General Hospital was investigating a data security incident. Lawrence General Hospital has been working with a forensics team to learn more about the incident that actually occurred on the 19th of September. Hospital staff continued to care for patients during the incident, including walk-ins to the emergency center, but patients arriving by ambulance were diverted to other facilities for about 36 hours. While the hospital systems were offline, staff members filled out medical forms by hand and communicated by phone and in face-to-face meetings. Well, at least they were able to fall back and still do what they needed to do. That's something. Let's move on to the energy sector. A Pakistani power company had its data published following a ransomware attack. Ransomware operators published data stolen from Pakistan's K-Electric Power Company. K-Electric suffered a ransomware attack last month, and we spoke about this then. And, to their credit, did not pay the $3.85 million demanded as ransom. The attack that happened on September 7th disrupted the company's billing services, but did not interrupt the power distribution. NetWalker, which is believed to be the group that caused the hack, released 8.5 gigabytes worth of archived data and files allegedly stolen from K-Electric. A Pakistani security firm, Ransomware, had examined the archive context, told the press that it contained sensitive information like financial data, customer information, engineering reports, maintenance logs, among other things. Let's talk fashion getting hacked. Swatch Group has acknowledged a cyber attack. Swatch Group, also the Swiss company that makes those wonderful watches, says its networks were hit by a cyber attack this past weekend. Once the company detected the attack, it shut down IT systems to prevent further damage. Swatch did not release further details about the attack. So we're waiting now to see who did it, what the outcome was, what type of information may have been taken. We don't know, but I'll keep an eye on this one. Although I just have a Fitbit, so it doesn't really affect me directly. A Russian national has been sentenced to 7 or more years for hacking U.S. tech firms. A judge in California has sentenced the Russian national to more than 7 years in prison for a role in hacking into and stealing data from LinkedIn, Dropbox, and Formspring. He'll be credited time served following his arrest. The jury found the individual hacked into computers belonging to those 3 organizations and damaged computers belonging to LinkedIn and Formspring by installing malware on them. He stole and used login credentials belonging to LinkedIn and Formspring employees. In addition, he conspired with other people to sell the data he obtained from these intrusions. The Russian was in Moscow when he broke into the computers in San Francisco Bay Area and installed the malware that enabled him to control the machines remotely and use the target's credentials to access LinkedIn's corporate information. With this access, he stole databases containing user login data, including encrypted passwords. His trial began in March of 2020, and he was convicted by a federal jury in July. He was convicted of selling stolen usernames and passwords, installing malware on protected computers, conspiracy, computer intrusion, and aggravated identity theft. In U.S. custody since March of 2018, when he was extradited from the Czech Republic, he will begin his sentencing immediately. With regards to world governments, North Korean hackers targeted UN Security Council members in phishing attacks. A hacker group previously associated with the North Korean regime has been spotted launching spear phishing attacks to compromise officials part of the United Nations Security Council. The attacks disclosed in a UN report last month have taken place this year and have targeted at least 28 UN officials, including at least 11 individuals representing 6 countries of the UN Security Council. According to the report, operations took place across March and April of this year and consisted of a series of spear phishing campaigns aimed at the Gmail accounts of UN officials. This is why you hear so often, at least here in the United States, the federal government tells its employees, do not use your personal information or your personal accounts to conduct official business. In a throwback to some of our earlier episodes, Blackbaud has filed with the SEC and disclosed that the breach compromised bank account data. So, months after disclosing a ransomware attack that compromised data belonging to many clients, customer relationships management software provider Blackbaud disclosed the information. They are now acknowledging that the attackers may have accessed more than just names and email addresses. Bank account information may have been compromised. The additional information came to light in an 8K filing Blackbaud made with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission on the 29th of September. The attack occurred in May. Blackbaud paid the ransomware demands after the attackers said they would destroy the purloined data. The list of organizations directly affected by the ransomware attack on Blackbaud include a long list of entities such as charities, nonprofit foundations, and universities from the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, and the Netherlands. Not to bury it too deeply, but a $6.85 million penalty for a HIPAA data breach violation has occurred. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Office for Civil Rights has imposed a financial penalty of $6.85 million on Prima Blue Cross for violating the HIPAA Act. A 2014 data breach affected the protected health information of 10.4 million patients. The Office of Civil Rights investigation of the breach found systemic noncompliance with HIPAA rules. This is the second largest ever HIPAA violation penalty. Moving on, a former employee has been sentenced for damaging his employer's computers. An IT guy who was tasked with locking out ex-employees from the computer network has been jailed after he logged in after being fired and wiped an office's computer storage drives. Now, interesting in this filing, the business in question is only referred to as Business A. They have been redacted. A U.S. district judge has sentenced the former IT support person to 1 year and 1 day in prison for accessing his former employer's computer systems, deleting file storage drives, and changing storage management system passwords. The individual was also ordered to pay his former employer nearly $200,000 in restitution. He was found guilty of intentional damage to a computer and attempted intentional damage to a computer. The individual's responsibilities included disabling company users' network access credentials at the end of their employment. On the day that he was terminated, the individual didn't return his work-issued MacBook Pro. He went home and that evening used the laptop and his home internet connection to repeatedly attempt to log into the company's network using his credentials and those of a former colleague. A couple of days later, in the early hours, he managed to get into his office PC remotely using the coworker's details. From there, he was able to delete all of the file storage drives used by the Washington office, then change the password to access the storage management system, according to the DOJ. The 1 year and 1 day prison term marks a halfway point between the 2 years prosecutors had sought. Once his sentence is complete, the individual will be subject to a further 3 years of supervised release and is unlikely to be hired again as an IT support person. This is what happens when IT pros go bad and when too much access is given to one individual. Trying to find the balance is hard, but it's something that we all have to do. Moving on further, Microsoft's source code has been leaked, although it's not that bad. Source code for Microsoft Windows XP, Server 2003, and older operating systems have been leaked online. The leaker claims to have spent the last 2 months compiling a collection of leaked Microsoft source code. This collection is 43 gigabytes in size and was released on 4chan. Inside the collection, there is the alleged source code for Windows XP, Windows Server 2003, MS-DOS 3.3, 6, Windows 2000, 3 versions of Windows CE, a couple of embedded Windows versions, Windows NT 3.5, and NT 4. The folder also includes a media folder containing a bizarre collection of conspiracy theory videos about Bill Gates. Interestingly, the leaker states that the Windows XP source code has been passed around privately between hackers for years, but was not publicly released until last week. Obviously, Microsoft is investigating this issue. It appears that much of what was made available was previously leaked material. While Windows XP was released almost 20 years ago, if any code is still used in modern versions of Windows, this leak could be a potential security risk. However, I would put this on the maybe not so bad side. If anything, it's a good look at how Windows has developed through the years. And finally, a little bit on a sadder note. A student has been arrested for allegedly launching attacks against an Indiana school district system. Authorities in Indiana have arrested a 13-year-old middle school student in connection with a series of cyber attacks against the computer network of the Valparaiso School District. The alleged hacker is a student at Benjamin Franklin Middle School, a highly rated public school with 820 students and a student-to-teacher ratio of 18-1. Police confirmed on the 18th of September that they had taken a boy into custody on the 17th after officials discovered he had allegedly entered the Valparaiso Community School computer system. The police captain said that the boy is believed to be behind a series of cyber attacks that have struck schools in the district since the pandemic triggered a shift to online learning. Nearly a quarter of the district students are currently engaged in some form of remote learning options. That's all for the news this week. I'm your professor of cyber risk. We'll talk again soon.